Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. I know how difficult it is to find worthy material for your children to read, and I hope that the reviews that I do here at Holding Steadfast are encouraging to you and help you find quality books for your children to read, and books that you know that you can trust putting in the hands of your sweet children. So with all that being said, today's book review is for a teen novel, and it is called I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. And if you followed any of my earlier reviews, you know that I did her book that she wrote with Steve Shankin recently, and so I really enjoyed that book and wanted to look at a few other things that she had written, and I had missed reading this one earlier, and so I kind of picked that up. Definitely some caution with this particular book. It is a young adult historical fiction novel set in communist Romania just prior to the revolution. So this book is recommended ages 12 through 17. That's really how they bracket it, some of that young adult 12 to 18. So from the outset of this review, I definitely think it's good to simply establish that due to the possible disturbing content of the text, I would recommend ages 16 and up. The characters are older. So definitely not a middle school book. So if you have a middle school reader, this is probably not the book for them, but it's probably worth going and listening through this entire review anyhow, that maybe it's something you want to put on their to read list, or perhaps as part of a historical unit that you may be studying, that you want to give that as an option. But again, there is some profanity in this book. There's definitely violence. There are mentions of suicide. There is teen romance. There's really only kissing, but there is one sexual reference. So definitely want to kind of just on the outset make that clear to you. So before I begin into my full review, I just want to read to you sort of the opening of the book. That's something new that I'm doing, and hopefully that kind of gives you a feel for the author's writing style, for the characters, for the voice that is in this book. So the beginning of this book, the first section is titled Beneath the Gilded Frame. They lived in darkness, breathing shadows, hands plunged deep within their pockets, hiding frozen fingers balled into fists. They avoided the eyes of others. To look into the face of fear brought risk of getting trapped in its undertow. But somehow, invisible eyes, they were forever upon them, even in the darkest darkness. Watching, always watching. Romania's perpetual sense of surveillance. That's how it's been described, the burden of a secret storm. This is not recited from memory. There was a student, a young man in the capital city of Bucharest. He wrote it all down, then feared it was a mistake. We speak of mistakes. Some believe that Dracula is the most frightening character associated with Romania. When they learn the truth, will it haunt them? Dracula is fiction, with no real connection to Romanian history. But there was once a real bloodthirsty monster living in a castle in Romania. He remained in his tower for 24 years. While Dracula chose specific victims, this other monster chose to be evil and cruel to everyone. He denied them food, electricity, truth, and freedom. The citizens of Romania were stoic and resilient, but they suffered a terror of tyranny. How many, you ask? 23 million people. Names and history largely unknown. Then a metal box found next to a grave. Inside was a manuscript. This is how one boy told the story. And so from there, the story opens up with the main character who's telling the story, and he's recording all of this down. So it's definitely an important story, definitely something that's going to grip your readers, wanting to know what's going on, and this is about the regime that was in Romania. So the narrative is primarily told in first person, and following Christian. He's a 17-year-old young man. He is questioning his life. He has a lack of hope for his future. He lives in a small apartment with his parents, his older sister, his grandfather, who is just beloved to him. The first person narration the story is situated is like this retelling of events, which you get from the opening. It sort of sets that up. Christians often also inserting comments of what he did wrong or thoughts of what he didn't know at the time. And this structure really develops intrigue in the reader because you want to know more, like what went wrong, what didn't go the way that he thought it would. Sepetys also inserts reports into the story, which are from the secret police. And so that adds suspense and tension because the things that Christian thinks are actually private are not. And those are revealed in those secret reports. So the story ultimately opens with Christian attending school, and he mentions that he has a crush on a girl, Liliana. Bunu, his grandfather, is ill, and Christian's deeply concerned for him. Christian then is approached by one of the Secu, and essentially those are like the secret police, and he's essentially forced to become an informant in order to keep himself out of trouble, but also to secure medicine, he believes, for his grandfather. Christian's mother cleans for a diplomat in her home, and she supposedly refuses to inform on the diplomatic family, and so that's also why they're going after Christian, hoping that he will tell them what's going on. There are many details and dynamics revealed in this powerful story that speak to the heart of what the Romanian people endured. I could not possibly do it justice to summarize all of it, but ultimately, because of a lack of trust, Christian believes his best friend Luca is actually the one who informed on him that started this whole process to begin with. The relationship with Liliana at one point becomes strained. They do reunite at the end. Bunu is brutally beat to death, so that is where some of the violence comes in. Christian uncovers, with the grandfather, that's like, cool, just a little bit. Wait, there's a whole lot more because of the revolution. Christian uncovers that actually his sister was the informer. And so that just devastates him, and he has nothing left to lose. So he places his private notebook on the desk of the diplomat. And what Christian is trying to do is he's hoping that if he can get news out to the rest of the world, what has taken place or what is taking place in Romania, that other people will come to help. So that Americans would come to help, that other nations would hear what they're doing. He's also getting little bits of news in, and so he's hearing about these other countries around them that are having revolutions against their leaders and regaining their freedom. And so in the story, he's desiring that. He has hope for that. But he also has a sense of hopelessness. Like, I can't continue living like this. I'm going to take some chances. And so ultimately he could die if that was caught or found. In the end, Christian does survive the revolution, but he does learn that his sister was actually a double agent. So at one point he believes that she is the one who informed on him, that he finds out that she's the one that informed on him. But what he doesn't know, and he never learns from her, is that she was actually a double agent. And then she is brutally killed. And so he kind of lives with that regret. And so the story ends with that idea that he has that regret, that shame of their last moment together, because he didn't know what was really going on. So stories like I Must Betray You are works of historical fiction, but they're still powerful, and they're really necessary because they get to that emotion. You can empathize. You begin to understand what other people may have gone through, what they were thinking. And so for readers who live in such a sheltered world, or just a different world, where we don't have bombs going off, we don't have anybody constraining our use of the internet or free speech, or we can't talk to each other, or this lack of trust. You don't know who's informing on you, right? And so what you could be getting in trouble with. And so it's really important for novels like this that do such a good job of a lot of research that goes into them to give voice to the tragedy and the lives and experience that others have faced. So I do think there's an important place for novels like this. So while there is some profanity, there are some things that are of caution. These aren't books that I would say should never be read, right? Like, these aren't promiscuous books. These aren't ideological books that are going to manipulate children or anything like that. They're just really informing of a particular time period. And so this novel is worth reading with that regard. But again, it also shouldn't be entered into lightly. And I would definitely, if you have an upper high school student and they're exploring different things in in their historical curriculum, or you want to sort of add this as a companion piece to open their awareness of certain things, I would definitely can see it being used for that. So just some specific notes. You can definitely check out my website, and that is holdingsteadfastreaders.com, and you'll find way more details on there. I have specific notes, and so you'll see profanity of where that occurs and that sort of thing. There's more details in there about the budding romance between Christian and Liliana, so you should definitely look at that. There are a few instances where they kiss, and there's a confession of love, and they are mentioned later. There is a mention, so the one sexual reference in this particular book is to a Trojan. So Christian is going through his sister's box, and that's where she has in there, so tampons are mentioned, and so she's hiding those in there. And then as he's going through the box, though, he's looking for something else. There's a mention of, and this is all that it says, quote, a wrapped square called Trojan was also in her box. And so, well, end quote after Trojan. And that's on page 200. Nothing else is mentioned. There's no other details. It's just that passing note in there. There is an incident. So the one guy who is in charge of following Christian and getting reports from him, you find later that I don't know if he really has a relationship with Cece, or if she's being used in a way she has no choice of. But Cece is caught in a car with the agent, and there is a mention of his huge mitts that are foraging my sister's lap, and she has smeared lipstick, and so that's on page 12. And so those are some of those sexual references I just want to make you aware of. But if you go through my review, you can kind of scroll down and you see some other references. You'll see any profanity and where those appear. I also in there give a detail about the grandfather's beating, because some of that detail might be a little graphic for some of your readers. But again, if you're waiting until your children are older, it's probably not going to be a problem. But this is not a middle school reading book. So it's unfortunate that a lot of them get labeled like that because in that age bracket, because that's not really something that a middle schooler, this book, the details and things like that we would want middle schoolers reading. In my review, I also give some quotes, some things that I really liked about the book. And so some of the final quotes in the book, I'm just going to share these because I think these are worth sharing. It says, every one of us, and if you haven't noticed, the young people have been bravest. No regrets and bravery. And then that's on page 271. Another quote is, if communism is paradise, why do we need barriers, walls, and laws to keep people from escaping? A great question, indeed. In the days ahead, let us not forget these sentiments as we reflect upon communism's aim to create a man without a memory. And that's on page 279. And then one of the last parts from the book, and that's how I eventually ended up at the cemetery, standing at our family gravesite with a manuscript. I've spent years panning for truth, interrogating my memories, correcting false narratives, and pondering the fact that when betraying others, we often betray ourselves. That was on page 291. So what a beautiful way to kind of start ending up this story. Also, if you do have your reader read this book, definitely do not let them skip the author's note that begins on page 305. Sepetys gives a beautiful account and tribute to all the people who assisted her in her research for the novel, and she provides additional historical resources as well and notes for anyone who wants to kind of dive into this part of history a little bit more. She also writes, and I quote, I hope that through reading I Must Betray You, readers might be inspired to research the histories of the captive nations, the fall of communism in Europe, and most relevant to this story, the incredible fortitude and endurance of the Romanian people. Romania joined the European Union in 2007 and continues to make progress. How can we assist that progress? We can share their story. History is the gateway to our collective story and the story of humanity. Historical fiction allows us to explore unrepresented stories and illuminate countries on the map. Page 309. I think that's a beautiful way to end the story and give a little bit of context for her, what led her to write this story. So definitely don't skip the author's note for this particular book. And that's pretty much all that I have for I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. And just if you're skipping ahead and you're only hearing this little bit at the end, this would not be a middle school book, but definitely ages 16 and up, and a great historical fiction story that is just going to grip your reader.